Welcome to the Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtrakker.com. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, joining today's podcast is my friend Bronson Arroyo, the Reds Hall of Fame pitcher and musician. Welcome, Bronson. I'm thrilled to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You've had a great career in baseball, and you were drafted by the Pirates in the third round in 1995, and you made it to the MLB with the Pirates in 2000. You pitched 16 years in the major leagues with the Red Sox, the Reds, and the Diamondbacks. You were part of the 2004 World Series championships, the Red Sox, and you just elected to the Reds Hall of Fame this year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, before we get into baseball, I wanted to tell you, I listened to your cover of Everlong. It's one of my favorite songs. And that you really did a great job on that. And then when I asked you about it, you said you had Stephen King do a line in that. I heard him say it, but how did that come about?
Yeah, so, Stephen was a big Red Sox fan. He still is a big Red Sox fan. He lives in Maine. I think he's coached baseball in his life several times at the Little League level, and he also owned a radio station. So it felt like it was kind of a no-brainer for us to ask him if he'd want to do this part in Everlong, because in the breakdown there, just before that last chorus in Everlong, you really can't understand what Dave Grohl is saying on the record. It's kind of like he's mumbling a little bit. So we thought it'd be really cool if Stephen could write a piece for it. And so we asked him, this is the offseason of 2004. We just finished winning the World Series. I'm making this record kind of on a deadline in a lot of ways, because I was asked if I wanted to put a record out, and I just said, man, there's just no way I have time. I mean, we were really busy taking the trophy to different state capitals, and there was just so much going on at the time.
Right.
Feeling like you were in the center of the universe, doing TV shows and stuff. And so I was kind of crunching this thing together, but we asked Stephen if he would do it, and he said, let me listen to the song, and if I think it's, not junk, I'll do it. And so he wound up writing that part. And if you listen to it, he tells this, when it's Stephen King, it feels kind of creepy in a way, right? Because it's like, it sounds like a doomsday prophecy a lot of ways in what he says in there. And but that's his voice. And we shot it over to him, and he did that. And we had a couple chats about it, and he was writing a book all through 2004, where he was chronicling the baseball season from Fenway Park. He would sit in the stands, and I think he would take notes during the games. And I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I know there's parts in there where he says, I'm not sure who this guy Arroyo is. And then by the end of the year, he's saying, looks like this guy is about to be a frontline starter in Major League Baseball. So it's kind of this cool transition of him learning who I was, and then getting to work with him a little bit was cool.
That must have been very cool if he was writing a book about the Red Sox already.
Yeah, it was just kind of one of those moments where I can remember being in Pittsburgh when I was a rookie and I was pitching to the Cardinals, and I remember striking out Mark McGwire and looking up on the Jumbotron, and Arnold Palmer was watching the game from the front row. And it's just an odd thing as a kid to think, man, I just struck out Mark McGwire and Arnold Palmer just watching me do it. A strange position.
That's surreal, right?
No doubt.
Hey, I saw an interview you did just recently. I think it was with Frazier, and you were talking about, you came out with an album that it's your original stuff now, right?
Yeah, so I put the record out in February. It's called Some Might Say, and it was really my first stab at original music. I had done that cover album in 2005, and I was waiting a long time. People kept saying, when are you going to put another record out? But I really wanted to make that second album not be a cover songs and be something original. But, I didn't pick up a guitar till I was 22. So it took me a long time just to figure out how to play and to sing and to get comfortable on the stage. And I'm still, kind of uncovering layers of that. But, in the midst of that, writing your own songs felt like a whole nother genre, something completely different, and not just a performance, but now to put something down on tape that you felt was quality enough to put on a record. And so it took me until I retired really to take that process seriously. But with some friends around here in Cincinnati, one of them being Elliot Sloan from Blessed Union of Souls, the lead singer of that band from the 90s. He helped me write a lot of these songs. I would go to his house or another buddy named CJ, and we would take these ideas from the band, and I would bring just a subject matter for the day. And all those songs on that record from top to bottom kind of came out of my brain. They're ideas that I've observed in the world, or a little bit about myself. And, it was a fun project to do with a bunch of guys that I've known since 2004.
Yeah, that had to be cool because I find music playing, there's a freedom in it. Like you're just, going with, you're not really thinking, you're not responding, you're kind of just reacting. And there's a freedom in that. Uh, and writing your own stuff, now you're even more free because you don't have to make it sound like someone else had made the song sound.
Yeah, yeah, you can, put your own flavor in it. And people ask me a lot of
Yeah.
times listening to the record, they'll say I can hear a little bit of Pearl Jam in there. I can hear some Tom Petty.
Oh
I can hear
yeah.
I can hear some folk music in there. It's kind of a melting pot of all the things that I've listened to in my day, and all through the minor leagues, riding on buses with 150 CDs before the iPod came out, playing on a Walkman. And you know, um, you can't help but be a product of what you listen to. And so you hear some of those
Oh yeah.
influences, right? You get the opportunity to kind of say it the way you want to say it.
Yeah. And even like in baseball, I always say we're all standing on the shoulders of people before us. Like when I talk about data in baseball and things that I talk about, it's like, well, I learned them from someone. It's just, you know, in music, there's only so many combinations of chords you can do.
Right. Yeah. And we tend to think that the best players in the game or the best, quote unquote musicians on the planet were always originals. But if you ask them, they'll always tell you,
Yeah.
you ask a guy like Eddie Vedder, you ask a guy like Paul McCartney, who were
Right.
his influences, and Chuck Berry would have been his idol. Right. And a lot of there's no way to get to the promised land without building on the shoulders of giants before us.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to baseball, your fastball was typically 87 to 89, which would be low by today's standards, but you were very effective. And I feel strongly that if you pitch with command and your pitches are mixed well, you could be effective today. What do you think about what made you so effective, and how did you use your pitches together?
When I was growing up as a kid, I threw to this tire that was cemented on a bucket since I was probably 7, and because the strike zone never moved, right? I didn't have a catcher there who could frame it or make or soften the blow on the outer edges.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of finite strike zone, right? It was either you hit the tire or you don't. And I don't know if that played a part in my command, but we always had a ball in our hand as well. We were playing baseball year round, and I was always a pretty athletic kid, and you're just trying to find ways to be able to control that ball. And for me, it was thinking about how am I going to have command, and then how am I going to have like a consistent shapes was kind of a
Right.
theme always in my mind. It was like, how can I make my pitches move in the same direction all the time, and how can I also have them land about where I want to? And without that foundation, there was no way I would have probably even played, past, maybe junior college or something. But having that ability to do that at the high school level, and was, back then I was throwing 87, 89, we touched 90, 91, which is kind of where I lived my whole career.
Right.
They always thought I was going to be bigger and stronger and throw harder. I never really did. But what I did was I kind of put a magnifying glass on the ability to try to disrupt the barrel of the bat. And so you took the shape of the pitch, you took the combination of control and shape of pitch, but also the unexpectedness of being able to pitch in odd counts by throwing in, a right on right changeup inside to a big, powerful right-hander who maybe he'd never seen that before in his day, right? And just to be unorthodox in that way would give me an advantage on guys and just try to keep them off of balance. And that was where I was going to have to live, because without that, if they could really pin me down to what I was going to throw, it was going to be very difficult to survive 87 to 89.
Yeah, and like I always say, in order to do that kind of thing, you had to have a level of command, because if you, I think a lot of people confuse command and control, and guys with control that are throwing real hard, they're spraying in the zone or around it, and command is being able to hit that spot like you described. And then the other layer of that, I think, is I don't think it's talked enough about is how do you know what to throw? Like if you can command a pitch, how do you know what the right pitch to throw is? Like you just described throwing a changeup to a big righty.
Right. Yeah. For me, I think, my father turned my brain on for strategy early on in life. And you talked about seeing me lift weights, maybe on YouTube or whatever. I
Yeah.
was a little kid, I started in the weight room with my father at like about 6. It was right when we started playing baseball, and he just thought he's got hand-eye coordination. He can throw the ball across the infield like a 12-year-old, and I never have played catch with him. Let me see if I can put him in the weight room that I know about. I can get him a little bit bigger and stronger. I think we can get him at least a free education in college. And that was really kind of the birth of my baseball, kind of career. And we just took the game very seriously in a way that other people didn't. My father was going to the chiropractor. He was taking me to an acupuncturist. We were taking supplements. He was thinking about the game the way that a professional thinks about the game now. And this is in the mid 80s, right? So it's a different time when people didn't really agree with a lot of these philosophies, but he was kind of ahead of his time in a lot of ways. And but what he did in those moments in the weight room, all those thousands of hours that we were spending time together, was we were talking about strategy. Because in order to squat 250 pounds as an 8-year-old weighing 60 pounds,
you got to have it in your head too.
Yeah, and 6 months later, you're going to try to max out again one more time that year, and you're only going to be able to push 5 to 10 pounds more. And in order to get 5 to 10 pounds over a 6-month period is not easy. And it takes, what clothing are you wearing? What did you eat the night before? Have you been carbo loading? What kind of frame of mind are you in? Like you said, how are you psyching yourself up for this one push, right? There's all these factors that played a part in me parlaying that into being a thinking man's pitcher that kind of were seated in that weight room, trying to figure out how to push the most weight.
Right. And I think that's a really big part of command too, because like I had done the same kind of things with my son, including I had him taking I learned from studies that how effective beet powder was. And so we would put beet powder in a bottle of water, and he would drink it. And he always complained that it's awful tasting, right. But it was very healthy for him. Like we did things like that where people really weren't doing that. I guess I should meet your father one day.
My father actually passed away like 3 weeks ago, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's
I would have liked to have known him.
Yeah, we had a good run, and him and Scott Lovecamp, who was my scout, who you had on the show recently. We all met when I was a freshman in high school. And so Scott got to be around the unusual kind of household of my father, having this weight room and having this batting cage, kind of a primitive mound in the yard and on this 3.5 acres in Florida. And just, watching him hit ground balls to me all these years. And, we kind of made it happen, as you have with your son, kind of out of the backyard with really no guide, no rule book, and just kind of on the fly.
I think that's maybe why Scott thought that you and I would hit it off, because, very similar story,
Right. Yeah. And, as far as command goes, it's hard to put your finger on it sometimes, because, I think if you look at a guy like John Stockton and what he did at the free throw line, shooting 90-something% for his career, and then you take a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, and in theory, you'd probably say, why can't Shaq shoot the same amount of free throws every day as John Stockton, and they should have similar results? But some of this built into the machine a little bit. I think like running speed, I think athleticism, there's a certain amount of it that you can kind of improve upon, but I also think there's something there just from birth and the way they were biologically made from our parents. And sometimes people, I think they believe that you can teach command, and I believe that you can improve upon it, but I think there's some guys like a Greg Maddux that are just so far and away better than everyone else at doing that one thing that it's an actual skill. And sometimes we think we know we can't make a guy throw 10 miles an hour harder, but sometimes we think we can just talk people into command. And I'm not so sure that that's actually the case.
Well, yeah, there may be something to it, but I think a lot of it is in your head. We talk about Dorfman helping Maddux and also helping Halladay in the same way, where they weren't getting good results, and when they got their mind right, they pitched better. How would you say your mindset affects your pitching?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably affects it in every way. All of us have kind of, I think probably if you ask anybody who's been successful at the big league level, they probably have, I heard Adam Wainwright talking on the playoff game the other night, and he was articulating kind of the way that he goes about pitching a little bit, or you can hear just little pieces of it kind of leaking out. And I think we all approach it in a different way. I mean, for instance, when we talk about command or I always threw to an area that was kind of large, right? Like back in the day, people would say, well, you need to pick out this tiny little spot in the middle of the glove and look at the smallest spot, because if you miss small, then you won't spray the ball so much. But for me, it felt like it didn't feel comfortable. So I was kind of throwing to an area that I would say was probably a little larger than the glove, even though I had good command, right? But that's what made me feel comfortable. That's how I perceived kind of throwing down this kind of tunnel. And
but don't you think that that held you accountable? Meaning that when a guys throw a bullpen, a lot of times the catcher moves a glove, he catches it. There's no accountability to hitting a spot. So when you had your tire you're throwing to and it didn't move, if you didn't hit it, there was a result. You didn't hit it. Whereas a catcher moved the glove, he caught it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not having that buffer in a way of the guy being able to move a little bit and kind of miss the zone and almost in a way trick yourself. I would kind of liken it maybe to going out to the driving range, and we all go out to the driving range and hit golf balls. And as long as you're hitting it solid and it's going kind of in the direction you want, you think, oh, I'm all good. But then as soon as you get on the course, you realize that alignment means everything, right? And if you miss by 10 yards, it's a decent shot, but it's not good enough to really be, to really score, right? And kind of the same way with pitching, I would think in a way, like throwing to that tire all those years, you're right. I believe that the non-movement of the tire gave me the ability to have instant results of me knowing, oh, I missed. I missed there. Like when it hits the glove and a guy can just kind of softly take it outside the zone, you're not really sure if you missed or not. And that probably did help me in those younger years.
Yeah, and I would think that like when I focused with my son, we were focusing on visualizing the target, throwing to it, and having just a focus on hitting the target. So it seemed to me that focus had a lot to do with it, like no distractions, kind of blocking everything out. I mean, how did you deal with that, especially in a stadium with 30,000 people screaming? That has to be pretty hard to do.
Yeah, it is. I think probably the one thing that's the hardest part is what's going on underneath your skin, not so much the external, right? So you've got fans and all these things, but they're kind of prodding your adrenaline. And in a lot of ways, if you watch the guys who are the best pitchers in the game, if you see them early on in a ball game get in trouble, you see that they can kind of weather that storm. And a lot of times what they're doing is having the ability to try to get out of a big inning early on in the game without letting the outside external kind of factors spike that adrenaline to the point where they exhaust themselves and kind of chew up 2 and 3 innings all at one time, right? And I had the ability to get comfortable in an uncomfortable environment. I think I learned that pretty early on. I don't know where that actually came from. I probably believe that the more that you believe in your skill set, the more that you're consistent inside your training, that you're consistent in your bullpens, that you can consistently feel like you throw strikes, that breeds this type of confidence in you that you can then start pushing out the outside world. And even in an uncomfortable environment, you can find a way to kind of get a decent result. And I'm learning that now with the guitar, playing by myself. I played last night at a charity event, and just having the microphone and a guitar and nothing to hide behind, it's taken me years to get more and more comfortable to where if, let's say, it doesn't sound so great or I can't hear myself so well because people are talking too loudly or whatever, I still have found a way that I can give a decent product musically without having to feel like that my surroundings are perfect. And so, for me, it felt like if I could keep the adrenaline down, keep my heart rate down, and just feel the same way on the mound as I do in a bullpen in the game, even when it's second and third in the first inning in the playoffs against the Cardinals, then I was going to have a better chance of kind of being the true Bronson Arroyo that everyone expects me to be on the mound.
Well, what kind of training did you do, like in season, for example, like when you're doing a bullpen before a game, or like what kind of training would you have done? Like, would you have thrown to a target or to a catcher? Or if you throw to a catcher, how would you throw to certain areas to work on your?
So most of my bullpens, I'd say for probably the last 10, 11, 12 years of my career, when you're first getting to the major league level, no matter how much success you've had at the minor league level, you get to the big leagues and they always think that they know more. They always think that they can kind of tweak you a little bit, right? And that's happened a lot, probably happened more in the old days. I think people are realizing now that players get to the big league level because of what they've done already. Yeah. They kind of leave them alone a little bit more, or at least that's starting to be the thought process. And in my day, that really wasn't the thought process. It was like, oh yeah, we know you were good down there, but now we're going to show you how we do it, right? And that idea made it very difficult because you'd come to the big league level obviously playing against the best players in the world, the best lineups in the world. And now they're asking you to try to change a few things in the midst of already having success. And it made it very difficult. But as years went on, I'd say in the last 10, 12 years, you know, my program in the bullpen would have been, I usually was throwing, I'd like to throw, first off, I like to throw soft, right? People don't talk about throwing soft very often. And I say this is one of the most important things. It's one of the largest links that made Bronson Arroyo who he was as a guy who didn't get hurt for 19 and a half seasons and made every start, for having command and having the ability to get outs with less, all stemmed from this one idea. And the idea was, if I could throw soft in the bullpen and still throw strikes and still give you that consistent shape on my breaking ball or my sinker or whatever, what have you. If I asked you to play darts, right, and I said, let's hit the bullseye, and you would inevitably want to throw it a little stiff. It's the easiest way we think we can throw strikes. It's like with a little oomph on it. If I asked you to throw it very soft with kind of an arc on that dart, it would become much harder. And so I always felt like, not only am I going to throw softer, it's going to less chance of getting hurt. It's going to warm me up easier. I can kind of move into throwing max effort, but also commanding the ball kind of softer is kind of a second pitch in a lot of ways. If I can throw you an 83-mile-an-hour sinker, first pitch to a lefty and get a ground ball to second base, that's something different than throwing it at 90, right? So I've got this, not only do I have now kind of a plan B for the times that I feel terrible on the mound, it's crazy hot outside, I'm dead tired for whatever reason, things just aren't working, right? I have this plan B, but also in the bullpen, I'm constantly working on this feel. And when you throw the ball at 90 at max effort, that's a strike, and there's a certain feel that comes off your hand. But then if I say back that down to 83, like I said, it's kind of a different feel. You've got to kind of like work on this. And so the whole time, I really enjoyed throwing bullpens where I would hit the same spot 5 and 6 times with different velocities of the same pitch. And then I would move to the other side of the plate and I would slowly do that. And that was kind of the way that I kind of nailed down my command, this back and forth ability to kind of throw soft, hard with the same shape of pitch, but not make it feel like I was uncomfortable doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, what kind of combinations did you like to throw? Like, for example, did you have setups like, with various pitches that you would throw?
You mean for a specific batter or just in the bullpen?
Well, or for a batter or in a bullpen, maybe it's both.
I never thought of any of my pitches. I think part of what made me who I was I never thought of any of my pitches as a priority, right? I never bought into the idea that you had to throw 70% fastballs. Like you would hear that in my day. And I know now that they know that the breaking ball is a little easier to, harder to hit and put in play. And guys are throwing many more breaking balls than they have in the past.
Like I described my son, who's throwing like 55% sliders. That works for him, you know?
That didn't happen. That didn't happen back in my day very often. And people would tell you that was wrong back then in the 90s and in the 2000s. And now they're coming to find out through technology that, hey, it's actually a pretty good strategy, right? Well, I kind of learned that on the fly my own without knowing what the results actually were, but I never wanted to feel pinned down to having to throw a specific pitch in a specific count just because somebody said that was the thing to do. So I was always thinking the most outside the box. Can I throw a 3-1 backdoor breaking ball to a lefty to make it 3-2 without him swinging? Can I throw that inside, like I said, right on right changeup to Albert Pujols? These ideas made me feel like there wasn't a certain sequence that I had to get people out with. And so for me, there was no formula at all. It was my eyes telling me what's going on with this batter. Can I beat him to the spot in this chess match? And can I get him to hit the ball not on the sweet spot of the bat, right? I wasn't trying to make him miss all the time. Sometimes you were, but you hear now that, obviously the best defense is if the guy doesn't put the ball in play. They know that now. If the guy puts the ball in play, he has a better chance to get to first base. But if I'm a starting pitcher and I want to do my job and I want to get deep in the ball game, I'm going to have some balls put in play because I need some quicker outs. And so for me, it was about getting that soft contact and not so much just missing the bat.
I 100% agree. Like, for example, when my son pitches, he throws 3 pitches and 3 ground outs. I'm cheering on. I mean, I love that, Now, meanwhile, they're, like you said, they want to have 3 strikeouts. It's like, well, you can't get deep in a game, like you said, and help your team win if you're, getting knocked out in the third inning because you used up all your pitches,
Right. And there obviously is evidence to state that, if we have 4 guys in the bullpen and are throwing 95 to 100, and the third time through the lineup, we bring each one of these guys in, you don't get a chance to see them the second time, that formula can work as well. But just purely thinking of it from a standpoint of the starting pitcher wanting to do his job and feeling like he's contributed to the ball club, I wanted to get into the 7th inning. If I got into the 7th inning, I felt good about my job. If I was pitching 5 in the third, I was totally dissatisfied every night. If that was even if you won the game, 5 in the third just didn't feel like you'd done your part. And that's one thing about today's game that would probably frustrate me a little bit. And I would probably hope that I was pitching for a guy like Dusty Baker, who would allow you to have the ball in your hand a little bit longer if you were doing your job.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the other biggest things that I like to talk about is, I think it's very important is that being you. Like you said earlier, is that too often they try to change you without realizing the reason they made it to that level is because of what qualities they had. And that if they try to make a pitcher pitch like certain categories of other pitchers, they will never find out how a Bronson Arroyo could be a great pitcher because they would never let him be him.
Yeah. I've talked many, many times with Scott Lovecamp, who, he thinks about baseball more than any person I've ever been around. And he's obviously, thought about,
he's awesome.
He can tell you about stats about pitchers for the last 20 years that, would just blow my mind. And even then he'll tell you when he was a AA pitching coach, there were things that he was telling people that he completely disagrees with today. Completely. Like he wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And this is for a guy who does nothing but think about the game of baseball. And so, sometimes we just make mistakes and you hope that the next generation learns from it and we can kind of, let people be themselves. There's something very innate about the way you tie your shoes, about the way the gait that you walk with, and all of those things play a part in athleticism. And a lot of times I think you're better off leaving the guy kind of the way he is, as long as I only have 2 rules. One is, can you throw strikes? And 2, does your arm not hurt? That's it. If those 2 things can happen, then I'm all for guys pitching any way they can.
Yeah, to me, it's, are you getting outs with the least amount of pitches and least amount of runs, Right. I think a lot of times guys lose sight of the goal of the pitcher, which is to get outs. They're so enamored with how I threw hard or I got so much break on my pitch. And it's like, well, that's great, but did you get the guy? I have a cartoon that I sent around a bunch of friends, and it's a guy standing there with an iPad. And he goes up to another guy and says, hey, my vertical break was -19, velocity was 92.7, and my pace was 4.7 seconds, blah blah blah. And the guy says, did you win? And the guy stares at him blankly. It's like a lot of times people will talk about process, and I agree, you have to have a process to develop, but they also forget to have a feedback loop on the process, which is your results kind of feed your process. You have a loop to know how to adjust your process. And if you never have that feedback loop, you never know if your process is actually a good process. So you could be developing the most spin or the most break or the most velo, but if you're not winning, well, what's the point, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I obviously in this generation that's playing right now, there's more guys throwing 95 to 100 than we've ever seen. I mean, I can remember coming into a stadium and guys literally coming out to watch Rob Nen close out a game for the Giants because he was throwing 99 to 100 and he had a slider at 90, and it was like watching an alien pitch at the time. And now there's 3 of those guys in every bullpen. So we obviously understand that, like you said, the bar has been set and just continues to get better and better and better. But I've always felt like, a lot of times you hear stories about how can we improve pitching at the minor league level, so when these guys get to the big league level, they're ready. And there's so many guys who throw 95 to 100 now who've averaged, a 4.5 or a 5 ERA at the minor league level. And they get to the big league level, it stays right about that. And their stuff is so good, you can't understand why. And I often think, if you did want to pitch at the big league level and let guys go 5 innings, strike out as many guys as they can, miss the bat as much as they can, and then we're going to go to our guys in the bullpen, that would be fine if you gave them the ability to get deep in the ball game at the minor league level. But when you take a minor leaguer from the rookie league on and you kind of limit him to 5 innings every time all the way up to the big league level, and he's never expanded upon that, it never gives him the ability to do the thing that I was talking about, which is conserve energy, pitch soft, get outs with other things without the pedal to the metal. And so for me, if I'm running an organization, I'm making the guys at the rookie league level believe they're going to go 9 every night, right? Because I want you to start slow. If you already throw 95 to 100, and we know we have arm problems, and we know that we have problems with guys getting deep in ball games and conserving some energy, I want to make them believe that I want them to start this race slow, as a marathon, not a race. And if you start that marathon at the lower levels, and then as we move up into AA and AAA, you start saying to them, hey, we're going to start tightening it down, and now we're actually only going to go 6 instead of getting deeper in the ball game, I would think that you would give them the 2 ends of the spectrum, which would give them some kind of things to lean on when they get to the big league level in different scenarios. But it doesn't happen like that. They're constantly keeping them short at the minor league level and short at the big league level, so they only know one way to kind of pitch. And I think it's a disservice to the guys in the minor leagues to not allow them to feel what it's like to start the race slow and get deep in the ball game and learn how to pitch in that manner.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think like we were talking earlier, the Yankees kind of recognize that. And like with my son, was brought up and drafted as a reliever, but they saw that when he relieved, he was always going 3, 4, 5 innings. So they turned him into a starter. Right. Then he did very well. And then last year they decided to see, well, how many innings can you get? And he threw, I think, the most quality starts of any minor leaguer in something like 10 years or something. So he crushed it. So they're kind of recognizing that, hey, if we can get guys go deep in innings with a quality start, it's worth it, right? The reason I started this show was that many people throw hard nowadays, like you said. And I thought, well, what separates the guys at the high level now? I think it's command. Like a lot of guys throw 95 to 100, but a lot of guys at 95 to 100 get released all the time. The guys that stay, I think, are the guys who can command the ball. They can mix speeds. They have something other than just throwing hard. And that's why I also started the show.
I think, I think the perfect kind of example of that is the guy that I played with was Pedro Martinez, right? And you think, why was Pedro so unbelievably dominant, especially like in those late 90s years? And he's got command. He's got a variety of pitches he can throw.
Yeah.
So inside of that command, and he also has some very small things like intimidation, right? A mystique about him, right? There's all these factors that he's building into this one pie. And like you said, if a guy throws extremely hard, but he's all over the place, I always kind of liken it to this. If I played paintball, if we played paintball and I had a gun that always curved to the right, the ball always curved to the right, I can make an adjustment and I could still, get some kills. But if I have a gun that shoots to the right once and the left once, you're just, you don't know where to start, right? You're just kind of dead in the water. And if you do get a kill, it's going to be pure luck. And so, having the ability, no matter how hard you throw, to make those consistent shapes and to have command, like you said, is without question the foundation of everything. And if you want to see the difference between a Max Scherzer and a guy who throws 94 to 98 like Max does, but doesn't have command, you're going to find a Hall of Famer and you're going to find a guy who played a few years in the big leagues. And that comparison is so far apart that it shows you how large command is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said shapes too, because I started working with baseball when my son went to DBU and I saw TrackMan. And so I wrote some software that major league teams use, and I wrote a book then called Applied Technology in Pitching. And I was describing how to use the data to create pitches that would work well together. And one of the ways I described pitches was a shape. Because like you said, in my mind, a pitch had a shape. It was not just a speed. It was a shape in the air, and how I wanted that pitch to match with another pitch. Like when I saw your pitching, the locations that you threw with your pitches are perfect for your shapes. Like if you wouldn't throw high in the zone, you would throw low in the zone. You would, you know, that kind of strategy is something that I don't think is talked enough about. Like when you throw your changeup or your sinker or your curveball, like did you have locations that you preferred?
With my off-speed stuff, yeah, I think. Well, it's you're blending a lot of times what the strengths and weaknesses of the hitter are. That in a lot of ways, it's like if you can consistently command the ball with the shape that you want and kind of in the area that you want, that's kind of on my end of the spectrum. And then on their end of the spectrum, it's like, what do these guys hit well? So if for instance, if I could throw, if I thought my changeup was best suited down and away to most lefties, but then a guy like Lance Berkman just absolutely could destroy the ball on the outer half of the plate, then I'd have to start thinking in a different way. And that's when you start getting into some of those uncomfortable feelings of like, can I throw an inside changeup to Lance Berkman and get away with that, right? And it's so unorthodox. Sometimes you're not sure if you can, and you have to just sometimes go into a game and just kind of have enough balls to try it out on the fly. I remember having lunch with Scott, my scout, and we were having lunch before I pitched to the Phillies, game 2 of that first series in 2010. So we got no hit by Roy Halladay in the first game of the playoffs, and I started game 2. And Scott told me that he had been scouting the Phillies for the Yankees the last couple of months leading into the playoffs. And he said, I think that you can get inside on Chase Utley with a changeup. And that was such an unusual pitch. There's probably no righty in the game who'd want to come on the inner half with him having that super quick bat and being that close on a plate with an inside changeup. But we used it that game, and I got a couple of outs with it. But, that was part of who I was somebody who could take something into a game on a fly like that and see if it would work and kind of test the waters.
Yeah, because you had command of it then, so
right. You felt confident enough you could do that. I was going to ask you though, when you talked about writing that data with the shapes and how you would build pitches upon pitches, was there something in that data that was a surprise? Was there a combination of two pitches that you wouldn't have thought off the top of your head would have made sense together that then the data showed?
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I wrote a second book called Baseball Pitches, a data definition. And what I had done was I was frustrated by they were tagging pitches incorrectly. So when you had data on a guy's sliders, there would be a whole bunch of changeups and sinkers and oddball pitches in there, and it skewed the data on the sliders. So I came up with a way of a group of formulas that you can apply to the data, and it would automatically tell you what the pitch was based upon the shape. And I start the book off by saying that I'm defining pitches based upon how they moved in space, not by how the pitcher threw them. Meaning that the pitcher's intent has nothing to do with the pitch, the way it should be tagged.
Okay, and so you're saying that if a guy throws a slider, but it backed up down and into a righty, you would actually note it as a sinker.
Yeah, I would, or depending how it would come out, the data would tell you what it was. So that that was part of it. Because one of the things I wanted to find out was when guys got older, I noticed that pitchers that got older, their velo went down and they still had great results. And I wanted to know why. And what I noticed right away was when I applied those formulas, actually, when I applied the formula, instead of using a 2D graph, the formulas didn't work for like 6 months. I was figuring out why. And finally, I put them into a 3D graph. I'll show you later. And in a 3D graph, all of a sudden, I could see the separation between the dots, the plots of the pitches. Yeah. And I could see, oh, these are different pitches now. Whereas if you looked at them in 2D, you have pitches here and here, they look the same. Now you spin it 3D, now you see, oh, they're different pitches. And what I did was I noticed by that the guys that threw softer as they got older had good results because each of their pitches were different enough from each other. So that it's like even when they missed their location, which is kind of like what you were talking about, they still got a good result. And I was wondering why. And it was because their pitches were different enough from each other that it missed the bat, basically, or the sweet spot of the bat, And so I made a thing called, it's called a Boyle pitch wheel. I had to make a name for it. And it comes from like the idea of a color wheel. and it applies the pitches to this wheel. And so you can really easily see where a guy's pitches are on this wheel to know that they're separated. And if they're two of them are too close to each other, it's like they're too similar. You're not going to have a good result with that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What do you think of that kind of thing? Like, was your pitches different enough for each other? Did that make them effective, or what do you think made you so effective?
It was hard. I think the ability to work, like you said, in 3D, right? So a lot of times when we talk about pitching, we talk about in and out, up and down, and you rarely hear guys talk about front to back, right? Which is turning the box the other way. And I felt like I did a good job of not only being able to have command on both sides of the plate and, change you thinking left and right, in and out, but also front to back.
Change speeds, yeah.
Be able to throw a breaking ball at 68 and also throw that same shape at 78. It's two different pitches. And a lot of times I can remember I had a good conversation with Matt Belisle, who was a relief pitcher for many, many years with the Colorado Rockies, the Reds, bunch of teams. And as he went on in his career, he got better and better. And it was kind of his rookie year, I think, when I got here to Cincinnati in 2006. And he asked me, he said, in the scouting report, it said not to throw that guy a breaking ball, and you threw him a first pitch breaking ball anyway and got an out. Why did you do that? And I said, well, I gave him a breaking ball, but he was probably expecting a 75-mile-an-hour breaking ball, and I gave it to him at 67, right? So I was giving him what his eyes wanted to see, but in a speed that he wasn't ready for it, so you could still get him off the sweet spot of the bat. And some of that stuff needed to be done to get deep in a ball game and then exploit the real weakness of the guy that you wanted to explore, but you weren't going to be able to get him out 3 and 4 times in a row the same way. So I was trying to find creative ways to get off the barrel of the bat, moving back and forth and not just in and out. And so I think that when like you said, put the box in 3D, when you put my pitches in 3D, it made it more difficult for guys to kind of
it separates them. Here's two pitches, now here's two. They're completely different. Yeah, it's like using another dimension. You have people worrying about left and right and location, but now you got changing speeds.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what I get a little frustrated by watching kind of the 5-inning 95 to 100 mile an hour guy who only throws a fastball and a slider that goes straight down. There's so many of those guys in the game right now. And I just hate the fact that there's not enough creativity there. And I know that the powerful stuff can still work. But the problem is when you take that powerful stuff that's kind of one-dimensional in a way, or two-dimensional, let's say it's not three-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
That two-dimensional, very powerful guy, if he's having a bad day with command, with one of those two pitches, he doesn't have a third one to lean on. He also, if he doesn't have his best fastball because now he's 37 years old, like you said, you don't have another avenue, another road, another way to get these outs. And so what I feel like is going to happen with this generation is you're going to have a bunch of guys who have really good careers for like 3 and 4 and 5 years, and then they're going to vanish from the game, and they're just going to replace them with somebody else who throws 95 to 100. And it's going to be very difficult to find a guy who threw even 2,000 innings, at the big league level. And sometimes I feel like that's just a shame, because I think that, I never believe that the athletes of the next generation are getting worse. They're always getting better. It's just sometimes about what we're teaching them and the way that we believe that they should go about their business. And I wish there was more guys who threw 95 to 100 who would have an idea that they could tweak something like a Clayton Kershaw 3-4 years into his career and extend this thing out for the next decade, still getting outs in a different way.
Guys aren't given the opportunity sometimes to try those creative different ways. I think batters are really catching up to velocity as well. So throwing 95 is not like it was when you started. Right. So guys are seeing 95 to 100 all the time, and they're hitting it all the time. So the game is kind of going to have to adapt. I think it's going to swing back to around to more command. I think you need velocity, command. I think you need to read batters. So on the show, I've been kind of promoting the idea. It's like, all right, don't just try to throw harder. You ought to try to have more command, sequencing, your mental game. Another big one for me is character, which I wanted to get into you because you're well known for being a great teammate. All right. And my son had done an interview once that really struck me. And he was saying that in junior college, they're competing for a spot, and he wasn't rooting for or against his fellow pitchers. He was kind of indifferent. He was just focusing on himself. Then he got to DBU, and there they were teaching them to be in with your teammates, root for them, cheer for them, help them. And he did, and genuinely did. And he carried that into the minor leagues, and he's done that there too. And he was saying, well, in the minor leagues, everyone is frustrated. They're trying to get ahead. It's hard. You know, you've been there. And he said, when I did that, it just made it so much easier for me and them, because then they cheer for me. And it's like a cycle of, that kind of character, I think, matters a lot, and that's something you're known for.
Yeah, kind of paying it forward in a way. Yeah. And receiving the back end of that. I definitely prescribed to that my whole career. It's kind of who I was as a kid. I would say unusual in a way that I was aware of my surroundings as a kid and how to deliver some joy for somebody else before myself. Not that I wasn't taking care of myself, but I could always look around, and I always felt value in being able to look at somebody and say, hey man, are you thirsty? You want a glass of water? Like, to be able to ask someone that question and kind of nail it down, right? It always meant something to me. And so in the minor leagues, I was always a good teammate. I was, from the very beginning in the rookie league, there's guys who, like an Aramis Ramirez, who had an amazing career, 15 years in the big leagues, maybe more, borderline Hall of Famer, great third baseman for a lot of teams. He'll probably tell you he don't even make it to the big leagues if it's not for Bronson, because I took these guys to the grocery store, rented them their furniture, took them to the ballpark every single day, translated things.
I've heard stories like that. You were awesome.
And in those early years, it was more important because we had no money, and guys, that us obviously from the Latin side didn't understand the language, so it was hard for them to get around town and rent an apartment and find ways to sign leases and stuff. And so, as years went on, it got easier actually to do less work because guys then understood and they had more money and they had some help around. But in those early years, there's no doubt in my mind that when I got on the mound, that my defense was playing, as focused as they possibly could behind me because of the joy and kind of the giving of myself to them in ways that maybe they weren't feeling from other people. And that all plays a part, like you said, in character, of like your word meaning something and kind of showing up for your teammates, having integrity. I believe all of that stuff, without question, lengthens a career. It doesn't make a career, but if you're a guy who might only play 7 years in the big leagues, and a perfect example is I'm 40 years old. I've had 2 surgeries. I'm throwing 83 to 85 miles per hour, and I have 3 offers from Major League Baseball teams. That wouldn't have happened for hardly anybody else because of who I was inside the locker room, and it was all about character.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like, you see teams like, I won't say, that have great stars on them, and they don't really succeed. I think a lot of that has to do with what team chemistry, how the team. You see scrappy teams come together like the D-backs recently, and they do really well. And I think it's a lot of that is character and how they play as a team.
Yeah. And like we said, we're building on the shoulders of giants. Teams are getting better and better at these fine points. I can remember I got chewed out a couple of times for taking naps before I started games. Now every major league team has a nap room, right? So we're learning from the mistakes of the past, and that goes along with the character. If you watch the interviews of young guys in the game now, and it's not every guy, but I'm going to say a lot more than there used to be. These guys are articulating the real, reasons why they're being successful, the things that are important. I can't remember off the top of my head the starter for the Marlins, Latin kid, really clean cut, had a really good game in the playoffs. And they had him in the dugout after he came out of the game after like 7 innings, and he was talking, and Wainwright was doing the game with AJ Przinsky on Fox. And his interview was an absolute masterclass in describing the important things that got him to that point to have a good, successful night that night. And in the old days, you used to watch interviews and it'd be a bunch of cliche things. And guys are getting better at what they do across the board. And that is why sports always continues to go up and up, because it's not just about the physical part, but about taking care of yourself, about taking care of your money, about being better with your family, all the things that come along with giving an interview after the game, and all facets.
Yeah, I know. Like with my son, whenever they're going to minor league games, he's always out there as long as it takes signing things. Because I would always tell him that the reason you get to play this game is because of those people there. You know, so when a guy is standing in line for an autograph, smile, be happy because that's why you're able to do what you're doing. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair too, there's a lot of people that think that, if you're playing in the minor leagues, for one, that you're making a lot of money, which you obviously know is not the
Yeah,
case.
you're not.
When I tell people that I was, you're in AA, AAA, knocking on the door, playing in the big leagues, and you're making $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year, and you're paying for your own way to live around the country, they're boggled by that. But just the ability to kind of, to bring joy to other people in for a long period of time, and to be somebody who's we talk about consistent command, consistent personality matters, right?
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, consistent personality matters. And if you're going to be a grumpy guy every day and you're always consistent, that's better than being up and down. But if you can be consistently joyful and bring that joy to people, sometimes people look at you like, man, is this real? Is this fake? I'm not sure. Is this an act? But over years and over time, people becoming your teammate, they realize that you're bringing something very beautiful to the table, and it can propel you into places that you didn't think that it would help.
Yeah, I mean, I found that with you've seen some of the people I've had on the show, and what I've been finding was that one of my good friends, Scott Emerson, he's with the A's, the pitching coach. He hooked me up with a lot of guys, and I was telling him the other day, it's like, it's really funny. Every guy he introduces me to, I hit it off with, like, I could just hang out and have a beer with this guy and talk baseball for hours. I said, why is that? And he said, well, they're just genuine baseball dudes. Like, I actually had a call with Billy Wagner the other day. And he's talking to me like just a regular guy. He doesn't know me. I'm just some schmuck, he doesn't know, but he treated me like a regular person. What a nice guy. And I was thinking, well, here's probably one of the top 2 closers of all time, and just a genuine guy. And I think that kind of quality I see that in you as well. I think that kind of quality helps. It has to have something to do with that success.
Yeah. And there's something else that I also would ascribe to some success, at least for myself, is kind of having the ability to keep life simple as well, right? Like, you talk about character. If you map that character across your all 365 days, you're having to deal with possibly kids, your wife, your in-laws, tickets, all these things that kind of come along with being a Major League Baseball player, and the travel and everything. Is a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. And I've found that the guys who could keep the game a little bit simple and not have a restaurant on the side or just be distracted, you've got to have enough energy to kind of feed your own machine in a lot of ways. And if you keep that a little bit simple, I have found that guys can extend their career a little bit. I have seen some guys get kind of pushed out of the game by focusing too much energy outside of the game on other things that they could have used inside the locker room, and also not realizing that the game goes by very quickly. And even if you're fortunate enough to play a decade in the big leagues, which only about 1,000 people have done, right? If you can do that for 10 years, you've had a magical career, but it's still going to go by in the blink of an eye, and you're still going to have 40 or 50 years to live after the game. And so sometimes I really like to say to guys like, hey man, just keep it simple, man. Act like you're in the minor leagues. Just live in an apartment. Just pay your rent, have one car and drive it. Go to the ballpark, focus on your body, focus on your teammates, focus on winning. Do this. It's only going to last a certain amount of time. And when you're outside of the game, you can build a mansion with a bowling alley if you've made enough money, and you can drive 7 cars if you want to. But while you're playing the game, it just becomes a distraction. And I think that kind of plays into that character thing. And you wish you could stamp that onto some people. And I have definitely seen the evolution of that. Their guys are getting better and better at doing those things.
I remember my son, like I said, had started playing baseball in high school, 2nd year. Then he gets a scholarship to DBU his junior year. And what I told him was, I said, the DBU is a pretty good school. And I said, you know what, just go in the stands and sit back by yourself, no one there, just take it all in. Just appreciate that you're there, because you are so lucky to even be playing at a college. And so he would do that now and then. And every now and then he'd be up in the stands by himself, and the coaches would come out in the morning and like, Boyle, what are you doing up there? It's just taking it in, coach. Like I was telling him to, like you said, you're only there for a little while. Appreciate what opportunity you've got, make the most of it, help other people when you're there. Because like you said, you're going to be out of there eventually. So make the most of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed, I think as much competing in the game and trying to get outs is just kind of a being part of that brotherhood, being part of, you hear it all the time when people retire, the things they miss the most is really the people that they worked with. Right. And human beings are so much more interesting than inanimate objects, right? You could have all the cars you want, but they don't talk back to you. And, being a good teammate and doing all those things you're talking about, and extending that boys club. Like how long can you stay in the boys club? That's, when you're a little kid, you dream of pitching in the major leagues. And if you get the opportunity to do it, the longer you can, successfully keep that healthy, it really, it satiates you in a lot of ways. I'm very content not playing baseball and really even thinking about baseball a lot of times these days. Sometimes because I felt like I wrung every drop of what I had in my body, and I got it out in on the field. Had I felt like I short-sighted myself in some way and my career ended at 32 instead of 40, it would have been gnawing at me. And a lot of the joy in life after the game, for me at least, is the fact that I could put that to bed in a way that I felt like I came to do what I did and we got the job done. And a lot of these things we're talking about, these subtleties, these character things, played a huge part in that.
Yeah. And you crushed it 16 years. Most guys don't ever get to the major leagues, let alone play for 16.
Right.
How would you describe a complete pitcher? Like, what kind of qualities would you think a complete pitcher needs to have?
We talked about the basics. We're talking about command. We're talking about consistency of shape. We're talking about the ability to handle uncomfortable positions and get yourself comfortable in them. And that includes, being emotionally kind of consistent, right? Being able to go out on the mound and start the first inning with an umpire that's not calling balls and strikes the way you want them to, and to have the ability to not look flustered, to not show up your teammates or show the umpire up or let the other team know that your feathers have been ruffled, right? To me, a complete guy is he's got some mystery to him. He's like tough to figure out. You don't feel like you feel like he's a nice guy when you saw him in the outfield the day before, but when he's on the mound, there's a little bit of a mystique to him. It doesn't have to be intimidation, but it's got to be something where you don't feel so comfortable with him.
Right.
So you've got command, you've got consistent shape of pitch, you've got the ability to hold down emotionally, and you're not getting flustered by guys, and maybe you've got a bit of mystique about you. I think that is a complete pitcher for me, a guy who can then take those four skills and map that onto the mound 32 times a year and give the team a chance to win 20 times, give you 20 quality starts a year. That is the formula for me that allows that to happen. And inside of that, the biggest one to the whole thing is health, right? Like you got to have a healthy arm. So inside of that is also a complete pitcher is a guy who has a program off the field who allows him to pitch every fifth day without pain and can toe the rubber.
What would you say is the best baseball advice you ever got?
The best baseball advice I probably ever got was probably non-baseball, would have been kind of be yourself for the things that you like to do away from the field, right? If you're the type of guy who wants to watch the Discovery Channel and eat a pizza in the evening and be with his wife, do it. If you're the guy who likes to go out to the bar and have a couple of beers and can do that in a healthy way, then do it. Like you've got to kind of be the guy you are away from the field that you need to be. Don't try to be someone else. We hear it all the time on the field, right? It's like, you can't pitch like somebody else. You need to use your skill set in the best way you can. Well, off the field is the same way. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. You don't have to drive a Rolls Royce just because all your teammates are doing it. If you want to drive a Toyota 4Runner, drive a Toyota 4Runner, right? And being that authentic person takes a little bit of stress off you because you're not faking anything, right? And when you don't have to fake things, it's less work. So that's probably the best advice I ever got, which was actually from an old Yankee pitching coach that we had the same agent when I was in the rookie league. And that was before I went to the rookie league, that was the first advice I got. And that really, it probably would have been who I was anyway. Like I would have been probably authentic because it was easy for me, but that was a nice piece of advice that I got early on.
I love that because before every game, I text my son, good luck, be you, command and mix. Same thing. And he knows what I mean by be you. It's like their guys throwing on 99, you pitch like you pitch, I'm a big believer in that you should be yourself. And again, on and off the field, that's a great way to put it too, because I don't really put it that way.
Right. And I also think that, probably when parents ask me, give me some advice for a kid now, the first thing that comes to my mind is beat yourself up over missing your preparation, but don't beat yourself up for failures on the field, right? Because if you're not taking care of your body, you're missing meals, you're not getting consistent sleep, you miss a practice, whatever that is, you cannot miss in preparation. It's too easy, right? Like there's no excuse for missing preparation unless you're sick, right? And if you do that, then I think you can go to war on the field knowing that you're not going to be successful all the time and still walk away from it not feeling like you've got to carry this baggage with you, right? There's too many guys who get beat on the field, and you see it with kids all the time. They take it home with them and they live with this negativity on their shoulder. You've got to have the ability to wipe it off. And I think the easiest way to do that is to know that you're doing the best you can in preparation. So that way, when you do get beat on the field in the game, you can just say, hey, we'll get them next time. And I think for kids, that is huge.
Yeah. I used to always say that the result on game day is a result of the weeks and months before. So, right. How well you did that day is how well you prepared.
And sometimes you just have to say, hey, maybe the guy on the other side prepared better than me, or maybe it was just his day, right? You just have to, you have to know that if you're a great hitter, you only win 30% of the time. You've got to build that into the program. And that's why I used to love going into baseball seasons with the idea, people would say, what are your goals this year? My one goal was to give the team 20 quality starts. That's it. Because I kept it simple. If I gave them 20 quality starts, I knew my ERA would be decent. I knew the team, everything else would fall into place if I gave them those 20 quality starts. And so to keep it simple, that's what my mindset would be to start a season.
Yeah, I love that, because that's actually one of my goals too, was not to throw the hardest, get the most strikeouts. It's like, if you get the most quality starts, you're doing the best job that you can to get your team a chance to win.
Right. Absolutely.
And to me, that's the goal, is your team has to win. So,
Yeah, no doubt. And in the old days, people say, people only care about velocity these days. People have always only cared about velocity. It's part of the human condition to be like, oh, I've got speakers that are X amount of loud, and somebody makes a speaker that's even louder, right? Like we always want bigger and faster and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, what you find is that if you can't find contentment, right, then you're always looking for that next thing. And so you've got to be content. I tell high school kids, hey, whatever size your nose is, it is what it is, man. Like you can complain about it all day, but it ain't going nowhere, right? However tall you are, it is what it is. You better get content with what you have. And so if you can be content throwing 87 to 89 and still getting outs, you are taking some of the distraction away from the fact of trying to be like everybody else or throw harder.
Exactly.
So you've got to be joyful of the type of player you are. And, when people would say, oh, Bronson, man, we face you, man, you just throw a bunch of junk up there. You throw all this soft stuff. Yeah, a lot of times, man, it was the only thing I was
That's what wins.
I was proud of that. I was proud of that. I'm getting you out 68, man. Like that's just what I have to do to get the job done.
Yeah, it's like, be you, take what you do good at and be great at it. Don't try to be the other guy. That's totally what I believe in. And I think, and part of the reason starting the show was, I was trying to promote use of the command tracker target I sell, but also I was finding that people were focusing too much on just velocity. And I wanted to have a show that explored the different things that you need to succeed. And so when kids or minor leaguers or college guys are watching the show, that they know, well, if you don't throw 95, doesn't mean you can't have a successful career. You can. You just need to bring up the other levels too,
Absolutely. And from a standpoint of the people who are calling the kids up to the major league level, I've also seen in that time when we talk about bigger, faster, stronger, you know, everybody wants this velocity. I've heard out of GM's mouths, you know, yeah, Bronson Arroyo is a pretty good minor league pitcher, but he's probably not going to do that at the big league level because he doesn't throw quite hard enough, right? We've all heard that in every generation, and it's still going on. As you said, your son is not a hard thrower, and he's probably not going to get as many opportunities as the guys throwing 95 to 100, right? But if you're consistent, you consistently can win ball games. I think that you have a chance for people to take you seriously. And I hope that the evolution of the mentality of the front offices is going to eventually catch up to where they can finally like say velocity doesn't matter, because every guy who's worth their salt in the game will tell you that, but it's very hard to live it when you're pulling the trigger on players.
Well, it comes down to what you were saying. It's hard to be yourself and be true to yourself. And a lot of those guys, you see how many people come on this show. There's some big names that come on the show, and it's because a lot of they believe in what we're talking about, but not many people have been outspoken about it. So I think there's like a turning point where it's going to be a mix where you have some guys throwing hard, but some with command. Like there's like a level it's going to come to where you to realize that we don't care if we have the hardest throwers. If the hardest throwers win, great. Right. But we want to win games, right?
No doubt about it.
The last thing I always do on the show is I have 9 things I'm going to show you on the screen. And they're different qualities that I thought pitchers ought to have to be, you know, good pitchers. And I ask a guest if you would please pick what are your top 4, if you just the top 4 of what you would want in a pitcher. Okay, so out of this list, which are the top 4 that you think pitchers need? And I'll read them off for people who are listening. Character, command, change of speeds, movement, max velocity, sequencing, reading batters, mental toughness, and know who you are.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because you put all the good stuff in there, and
if a guy had all those things, he'd be a Hall of Famer, right?
Right. So off the top, I'm going to throw out max velocity right off the top, because I think you can win without max velocity all day, every day, in any genre, anytime, any place. You know,
wait. Would you pick max velocity as one, or are you throwing it out?
No, I'm throwing it out. Yeah, I wouldn't
Okay.
take that as one. I think command is definitely one for me. Movement is number 2, because that's talking about that consistent kind of shape. You know, so command and movement are definitely 2. And then I'm going to go with character, because I think if you have good character, that's gonna give you the ability to know who you are, have mental toughness. So I'm going character, command, movement, and then I'm going to go with sequencing over changing speeds. Just, you know, they're both super important, but I think the sequencing might take care of changing the speeds if you can kind of sequence your pitches right. So my top 4 are going to be character, command, sequencing, and movement.
Awesome. Yeah, that fits with how you pitch too.
Yeah. You know, it's you know, it's a mixed bag, like you said, and there's so many different ways to kind of slice it. And you just hope guys can figure out, like we said, how do you help your team the best with the skill set that you were kind of either born with or that you've procured over the years in the minor league.
Be you. It's like be you. It's like the team's got you on that mound because of who you are. Don't try to be some other pitcher. Try to be true to yourself and true to your teammates. I think if you help other people, most people are good. They'll help you when you need it. And
the other thing too, that I had talked about with Scott Lovecamp over the years, that the Yankees have come around to the idea, and I don't know if any other organization has, is that the fact that you draft a player when he's 18 years old, or let's say 21 out of college, it makes no difference either way. And you've been watching this guy for a couple of years, and there's a certain amount of skills that he's bringing to the table that you think makes him successful. And then you ship him into the minor leagues, and the scout has nothing to do with this player ever again. So you take him from the scouting him for a couple of years, you give him over to the minor league pitching coaches, who then have their own ideas of how this guy should be. And so I was really pleasantly surprised to Scott tell me that the Yankees, allow him to still have some time with these guys that he's drafted for the first couple of years, so that the way you don't change him so much and you kind of take the magic away from him.
Scott is down there in Tampa with them while they're developing. So they kind of keep it in line with, well, we drafted this guy because of this. Let's kind of keep him the same, but make him better, a better version of himself.
Right.
And I've had a few directors of scouting on the show too. We were talking about that kind of thing, the link between once you draft a guy, how do you develop them? Because like you said, if you bring him in and immediately try to change him, it's like you've erased what quality that the scout saw in him,
Right. Yeah. And sometimes when you tinker with a guy too much early on, it's hard to get back to who he was before, not only confidence wise, but even mechanically.
Yeah. One of the other things I had told my son years ago was, as he started doing well, I told him people want to help you. And I said, people really generally want to help you and give you advice, but a lot of them will be very, very wrong. I said, you're going to have to decide how to not take their advice in a polite way, but also choose who you listen to. So I would think you probably had a lot to do with, your probably taught you that kind of thing as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, going through the minor leagues, you absolutely found out that, not only, did people in the organization at the highest of levels up to the GM have different ideas of how you should get things done, but every single pitching coach you'd come across at every level might have a different way that he wanted you to get outs and the way he thought about you being. And so sometimes, like you said, you had to find ways to take information in and say, that's not going to work for me and I need to discard it. And sometimes it puts you in a bit of a predicament, because as a young guy, you can't just look, a guy in the face who's your pitching coach at the AA level, who's had a successful major league career or not, and say, hey man, I'm not listening to you. You can't say it that bluntly. So you have to find ways to kind of, massage the situation. And that does put guys in a bad predicament sometimes. And some guys can get, into, situations where the organization will kind of write them off merely for the fact that, they're trying to tinker with him in a way that he doesn't agree with. And he's kind of thinking like he's rocking the boat. But, you can just hope that most guys eventually get to a place like I did with the Red Sox, where they kind of say, whatever you're bringing to the table is good enough for us, man. And we'll just leave you alone. And it took me 3 years, 4 years at the big league level, bouncing up and down with the Pirates before I got that honor with the Red Sox. And once I got that, I felt like I was my old self in the minor leagues, and I was freed up to kind of pitch without thinking so much. And it really helped.
Yeah. Cause in today, like with your leg kick, they would be trying to tinker with that all day.
Yeah. And that's also been a problem in the game, is not having uniformity throughout the organization. When I played for the Diamondbacks for 2 years, it was the first team I had been on ever where the rookie league all the way to the big league level, they were teaching the same things with the pitching coaches, right? You didn't have that a lot. I mean, I've played for organizations where in the early years where one pitching coach had a totally different philosophy than the guy just above him at the next level. And it's almost impossible to have consistency when you do that. And so, they're having to clean up the front office as well as players getting better at what we do in order to get the best product possible. And you just hope that continues.
Well, Bronson, it's been great having you on the show.
I appreciate it, man. I'm off right now to do the second hardest thing in the world besides hit a baseball, is try to hit a golf ball and see if I can straighten that thing out.
Yeah, I'm gonna check out your album too. I didn't know that you had one with original stuff, so I got to hear that. I really genuinely liked your Everlong cover. That was really cool.
Oh, thanks. If you like rock and roll, the album's pretty rock and roll. There's a couple of softer songs on it, but that right there is the cover of the album. It's called Some Might Say. It's a white cover with a guy walking on it with the with the color wheel on his head. So
yeah.
Well,
all right.
I appreciate it, man.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Don't forget to hit subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released. Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtrakker.com.